Welcome, everyone. So today I want to talk about this post I read. So let me share my screen. And Lori, I guess you could maybe put a link to it in the chat.
Yep, will do, and I'll post it in the description on our YouTube and podcast.
I had a friend who sent me this, and he said, "John, you know what? How come HDF5 sucks at deep learning?" And so I read this post, and it seems like maybe very typical. I think for a lot of things you read, where it's like, I think the argument is HDF5 was developed a long time for machine learning, therefore must not be good for machine learning. Therefore, we need to develop a new format. And when I'm reading the article, it seems like a lot of things really are incorrect. So that might be useful just to go through these items, these criticisms, HDF5. And at least my understanding, a lot of them don't really apply, but maybe you guys will have some thoughts yourself. So the core argument is HDF5 is not optimized for deep learning. In HDF5's favor, it says it's very good at storing large data sets, but it was created before cloud object storage or deep learning and has these issues. So one issue is, number one, says it's difficult to query efficiently on cloud storage. You can't read, so the article says, you can't read using a library HDF5 files stored in S3. Well, everyone here probably knows that we do have the Rust S3 driver, VFD. And also for Python, there's S3FS, which creates a kind of simulated file that to HDF5 just looks like an actual file. So this article says you have to copy these perhaps gigabytes size files from S3 to local storage to process, and that's obviously inefficient. So, my rebuttal to that would be there are ways to directly read S3 objects from HDF5. And of course, we also have HSDS, which was designed originally around the S3 storage format. The second criticism, which I don't fully grok, it says it's difficult to apply transformations to data in parallel fashion. Well, in HDF5, you do have ability to do type transformations, right? So like if you have a data set that is an 8-byte float, you can read it as a 4-byte float, for example. You can do things like for a compound type, read certain fields of the type. I imagine he's thinking about some more sophisticated transformation. Like, let's say you had a type that was a complex value number, and you wanted to read out the amplitude and direction of that number. So that'd be a kind of interesting thing. But I don't think that's really critical. But if someone has ideas for the specifics and how that could be done, I'd be interested to learn. Number 3, it says HDF5, at least for Python, is single-threaded. That means only one core can read or write a data set at a given time. So there's a couple of things about this. Frameworks like PyTorch and Keras are Python as well. So they have the same kind of limitations of single threading. The way that PyTorch gets around this is that they use C libraries that are built multi-threading, so they can do certain operations in multi-threaded. So you call it from a single-threaded Python context, and these operations can invoke multiple threads to do things in parallel. And actually, for HDF5, there is with Python, you can take advantage of multi-threading in a similar fashion, right? In fact, things like uncompressing chunks in HDF are done multi-threaded. So I don't really see that as much of an issue. There's another aspect, which is that the problem for single threading, especially with S3 storage, is that the latency for the reads is relatively long compared to direct file access. And in Python and in HSDS, the way we get around this is using async processing. With async processing, you have what's called a task-oriented parallelism, right? You still have one thread, but when that thread needs to do an I/O operation, it can go on to another task, right? And once that I/O is complete, come back to the original task. So that it kind of gets around this limitation in many cases of having a high latency for storage access. Number 4, the author says, it's not integrated with modern frameworks like Keras or PyTorch. And that's true. I think you would have to write your own driver for these currently. But if you say the solution is to write a new file format, you're still left with the problem of writing a driver for that file format. So I would propose the better thing to do would be to enhance the support of HDF5 for these frameworks. Number 5 says, because HDF metadata is strewn throughout the file, it's difficult to access a random chunk of data. In fact, it needs many small reads in order to gather metadata necessary to pull out a chunk of data. So again, I have 2 responses. One, recently, Alexander Jelinek has proposed a HDF5 cloud optimized format, which is basically your regular HDF5 file, but with the metadata packed to one portion of the file. And this makes it much more efficient to read through S3, because when you do the first read, you will gobble up most or all of the metadata in the file, and then those subsequent metadata accesses become very efficient. The second point is that with HSDS again, that you get around this issue because the HSDS has its own schema that makes it more efficient to gather the metadata. Okay, so those are 5 criticisms, and the solution is ergo create a new file format. What do you guys think about either these criticisms or my responses to them?
John,
Yep.
I had a question on your number 2, where he made the point about it being difficult to apply transformations. To what degree is that possibly not necessary to put that in, quote, the library itself, and can exist as the layer on top of that if you were talking about transformations of the latter kind you mentioned, something a little more sophisticated than the obvious stuff? Does that really need to be in HDF proper?
Yeah, I'll defer on the HDF proper or not, but I think there is a a sense when you're talking about a client server operation. If you have a client that's remote from the server and the client is doing these transformations, in some cases, they'll have to read more data to do that transformation than if the server had done the transformation itself. Okay. Hey, Lori. Lori.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, I'll have to cut it short right now. We have a little bit of a situation going on
Okay, yep.
right now.
I will tell the group about your situation.
All right. Anyway, I don't know if Gerd wants to take
Yep.
over or, but
We'll
all right,
see.
okay.
All right,
Okay.
thanks, John.
Thanks, guys.
So John was having some rough weather situation, I guess. Gerd, do you think you could handle the discussion, or is there anything else anyone else wants to talk about?
Well, I would add, you find, I mean, I remember if you do a search for best format for machine learning, I remember seeing at least 2 or 3 other articles that were actually more balanced in the sense that they find a list of requirements and then had a set of candidates, sort of the usual suspects, CSV, HDF5, Parquet, whatever. And then they had, so they constructed a matrix where you had, let's say, the columns were the requirements or the features, so to speak, and the rows were the candidates. And then they basically said pass or fail, or I mean, some had a more sophisticated ranking system. Some were just checkbox, check mark, or cross for fail. And usually HDF5 scores very high on these. So it's, as with every publication, there's an agenda somewhere, and that's okay. That's just life. And so I'm not going to lose any sleep over that. I mean, there are some valid points, but then it depends on the context. And most of these articles are sort of context free, or people think, well, I'm doing machine learning. Well, that's a big topic. Others are doing machine learning and maybe mean something completely different by it. So yeah, had I known that John would bail out, or had I looked at John's weather forecast, then I could have prepared something. What came up this week? There are always things coming up. I mean, everybody has seen the announcements for Hug. We'll have an HDF view release soon. Did we release 110 already?
Yes, 110 was released, I think it was last week.
Yeah, April 6th, I think.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, HDF view should be released today.
Yeah. Other than that, I'm trying to remember.
So I will put the link for the Hug event in the chat, and then probably I'll also just continue putting it in the description for people who listen to this or watch this later.
Yeah, I had but more as a hobby, I had a chance to play a little bit with CoPilot, and yeah, just doing HDF-like things. You don't necessarily have to rely on IntelliSense anymore. You don't have to know what the prefix is that a function starts with, and so forth. So even writing C or C++ programs that do something with HDF5 is actually pretty convenient with CoPilot. I don't know if anybody else has played with CoPilot, but that seems to work pretty well. I haven't tried really, I mean, at the level of the examples, the user examples that we have put together on our website, I think at that level, yeah, CoPilot can easily handle that. And it might be almost easier, or it's certainly cheaper to have CoPilot help you along rather than booking a workshop or spending a lot of time searching around for examples. Just tell CoPilot what you're trying to achieve, and then you will have a working example in pretty short time in one of the supported languages, which includes C. But for development tasks, that's probably a different story. I haven't really had much to do in that line of work. Yeah, we had Scott already talk about his latest subfiling results, I think a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Those were pretty interesting.
Hey, Robert has a question.
Oh, Robert has it. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Gerd, I was wondering that does sound intriguing on the CoPilot. Is it too much work to have a call the doctor on a CoPilot demo as you described there?
Oh, let's do that. Yeah. I don't know. I usually get the chance when there happen to be 5 Tuesdays in a month. So I can make that a. Let me look at the calendar here. I don't know if we have
May is
one.
I think May is a 5 Tuesday.
Okay. So let's right. The first. That's the second is the first Tuesday. And then the 30th, yeah. So let's book that in for May 30th. Yeah, I'd be happy to do a quick CoPilot demo and whatever other tool I come across by then. Yeah.
Oh, okay, excellent. Thank you. I think that would sound very good.
Yeah. Of course, I'm waiting, but I'm sure somebody has tried to do some Emacs integration or something like that. This is using VS Code, so I didn't do that in Emacs. But in VS Code, it works pretty well. There's a plugin, I think it's just called CoPilot or something like that, and works pretty well. But I imagine there are plugins for other editors, probably for Visual Studio and for, I don't know if Eclipse has a plugin, but I was just thinking of something else. What was I thinking about?
Yeah, I think anyone can feel free to suggest topics to any of our Call the Doctor hosts. I think they're always happy to have someone do that part of the thinking for them if there's anything you would like someone to speak more on.
Yeah. I mean, some of these things are so good that it almost makes you think, is it really worth our while to continue to write help pages or something like that? Can't we outsource that to ChatGPT or something like that?
No, ChatGPT will spout confident nonsense. No. Maybe it's
Okay.
like it'd be well vetted, but I don't believe that like autocomplete is the way to essentially write our help documentation. Could it write stuff that then had to be polished? Like maybe, right? Like it could create a style of prose that would be like better than our average developers could come up with. But like, would it create imaginary technical hallucinations? Sure. Right, like somebody tried doing this for another project I was on, and it was like putting in fake it was creating fake organizations and like putting in fake links to websites, like because it created stuff that looked like it, but was not actually accurate. It had no vetting, right? All it does is just like glom stuff on the end and tries to see if that like matches its model. And I don't trust that stuff at all.
I'm just trying to do an example here. Keep talking. I can for a moment share my screen here. I don't know how bad the aspect ratio is because I have this editor in portrait mode. Can you see that?
Yeah, I think it will be okay.
So I just asked it if it can create an HDF5 file with a 2-dimensional integer data set with gzip compression applied, and it did pretty well. I mean, okay, I'm going to save myself.
I don't doubt that like something like ChatGPT can dig around on the internet and find similar examples and come up with something that looks like something that's simple. But like I would not use this to write technical documentation.
Well, to write all technical documentation, I would agree with that. But is there some technical documentation that could be created this way? Yeah, it's in a way, it's like an intelligent PHP, where like in when you do a quiz for students, you don't want to give them the same exercise every time. You want some variation. So this is like PHP, where the example is a little varied depending on invocation time or when the web page gets requested. And sure, I mean, deep down architectural documentation or talking about the history of something, I think that's going to be pretty difficult because it requires knowledge that is not easily scrapable, that is maybe exists only in some people's heads and has never been spelled out somewhere. But to look at our example collections, I mean, it would be an interesting experiment. I'd say CoPilot or ChatGPT, they can create those examples, and they are actually creating better examples. I remember they include error handling and things like that. I mean, many of our examples, they're bad in the sense that, yeah, they tell people you don't have to check return codes, you don't need error handling. Well, that's at least what the examples suggest, and that's not good.
I mean, that I would be more comfortable with, because those programs are small and vetted, and like the compiler will also vet them.
Mm-hmm.
The output. But like, I mean, for like things like an RM entry, like maybe, right? But like, how is like some ChatGPT thing gonna guess like what an RM entry should be, right? Like the developer who wrote that code knows what the semantics are, but I'd be willing to bet the ChatGPT does not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And would you trust it if it did? If it thought that it did, like how do you know that it's not hallucinating? Right? Like, I mean, there's a difference between ChatGPT that can show you kind of like something like the equivalent of like a bear standing on a unicorn and something that gets hands right. Right? Like there's AI is not good at certain things, right? Because like, you know, it can look at a bazillion pictures of humans and be like, oh, humans are kind of like shaped like this and kind of stand like this. But like hands are like much more complicated and it's terrible at them. It's like, oh, human beings, like maybe they have 15 fingers, who knows, right? Like there's lots of stuff that AI is not amazing at. And we should be mindful of its limitations. You know, are these things technical issues that will be overcome with improved language models, or are these fundamental limitations of the technology? I mean, the history of AI is replete with AI cliffs where basically like technology could not overcome certain hurdles. And so it's quite possible that ChatGPT is going to be like some flash in the pan that like is good for certain things, but like at a certain point just kind of stops. It's like self-driving cars. If you want a self-driving car that can like drive down a clear road when it's not foggy or visibility is great and there's not confusing pedestrians, then great, right? You can do that. Like a self-driving car will do that. But if you want to like put them in a foggy day where there's kangaroos, right, as they found out when they took self-driving cars to Australia and they were completely unfamiliar with their movement patterns, like, yeah, you wind up with like crazy accidents. Like ChatGPT does not deal well with novelty. So no generative AI deals well with novelty. So
yeah, but then on the other hand, the history of engineering is also full with goof ups. I mean, starting from simple in double quotes things like units. I mean, how many rockets have crashed or aborted because one engineering uses imperial unit, one engineering team uses imperial units, and the other uses metric.
Well, yeah,
how many
that's
times,
true.
how many millions of dollars have we seen that?
And this is true, but also software engineering is not real engineering. We are not, as software engineers, held to the same standards that people who build bridges are. Right? Like, I mean, look at how many data leaks there are from places like Sony in like 2011. Like, we move fast and break things. You do not move fast and break things when you are building a bridge or building, right? But that's totally acceptable when you're building something that handles people's credit card data.
Mm-hmm. Joe raised his hand. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah. Can you see my background image?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just sort of share a funny episode. I tried a Google Bard and I asked how can I do programming MATLAB? And the answer was H5 So that's the current status of AI.
You mean of Google AI?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll do something end of May. Last Tuesday in May, we will push CoPilot to the limits.
Oh, I have something I should probably announce. So I'm updating the release schedule today, and constantly being hampered by my new machine, which lacks GitHub tokens and even like the setting for using Vim to edit my files. But anyway, yeah, so I'm going to be announcing that we're going to probably retire 110 in January. That there's no reason to carry all these branches around. So we'll have 114 will be the version of HDF5, and we'll continue to develop, and everything else will be gone by then. So 112 goes away probably in May. That'd be the last release of that. 112.3 we end of life 1.8 at the beginning of the year, and so 110 will end at the beginning of next year.
What about Scott used to do his sort of benchmark from release to release chart. Is there a central place where we have that?
No.
And what does that look like with the latest releases?
They're basically uniform across branches. 110, 112, develop, 114, they're all basically the same now. I mean, the error bars on what Scott measures are not small, but as far as we can tell, they're pretty consistent that the performance has improved to the point where it was just about where 1.8 was when we stopped 1.8. Because 1.8's performance slowly increased over time as well, as new features were added to it.
But yeah, so do we publish that figure or?
No, we don't have public performance data. I mean, that's one of those things that I want to have up there, but there's many things that need to be addressed in terms of our being transparent about testing and performance. That's a part of it that will come.
Yeah. Oh, Robert has another one. Go ahead.
Oh, Robert, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to put in a request. If John wants to do a continuation on his comments on that article, and he has a little bit more, if he wants to prepend that onto another session, I'd be interested to hear the rest of his what he had to say there.
Okay. Yeah. We hope we hear from John again. No, I'm sure he's fine.
Yeah, I was wondering why I was feeling a little seasick while he was talking. I guess that's obvious now.
Yeah, he picked up his camera and showed me, and it was, it all seated, it looked fine, but yeah, when I saw the horizon, it was pretty. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really envy him there, but
it's the horizon sort of came and went. I noticed after in his background.
Crazy. Okay, all right. And so next week, I'm pretty sure it will be Alexander. So we'll reconvene next week at 12:20 Central Time. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.